Welcome back to Northwest City Politics in the Know with Juanita. We're glad to welcome you back to our show again this week. And we're very happy that there are people like you out there that are interested in the issues that happen in the cities in Northwest Community Television's viewing area. It is important for good government to have citizens that are following what's going on, and when it's an issue that concerns them, take the time to get the background information, find out what's going on, and then share your opinions and your ideas with your city council and with your mayors. And if you haven't watched us, each week we'll have somebody on from one of the 9 cities to fill you in on what's happening in that particular city, what issues are going on. And from time to time we'll have groups that affect all of our cities. So we're glad that you're with us tonight. And we're very happy to welcome Mayor Jeff Lunde back to our show from Brooklyn Park.
Hi, good to be here.
So you've been on our show before, but it's been a little while, so we're glad to get your input and let people out there know what's happening in your city. Mm-hmm. And you already know that I've asked you to introduce yourself out to our wider audience. Give them a little information about yourself and how you got involved.
Yeah, so I've been just reelected mayor of Brooklyn Park last fall. So already serving my 5th year as mayor. I was on the council before that. And just like everyone else, get on a committee and start to get involved and then tend to get more involved.
Right.
And so it's been a good thing.
And I also ask you, and I'm asking everybody that comes on our show, to tell us a little bit about Brooklyn Park's early history. Something people might not know.
Yeah, I think, obviously people ask, why is it Tater Days?
Okay.
And, the easy answer always is because there's nothing but potato fields up there. And so when people ask why, is it hard to keep their lawn nice and green? It's because they're sitting on potato fields, which is sitting on clay. And so way back when, there was Brooklyn Township, and that divided into Brooklyn Center and Brooklyn Park. Those names came from.
Oh, otherwise they were joined together as a township.
Yeah, I think townships just kind of broke apart. And so, 85th had been there forever.
Right.
And so things have grown. I think one of the interesting things is people ask, why does Anoka Hennepin School District come down? Because years ago, Osseo didn't connect with the river because, the roads weren't there. So the roads were right alongside the river going north out of Minneapolis. And so that's how the school district came down to grab kind of the river's edge of Brooklyn Park.
Well, now we'll move on to something that Brooklyn Park has been doing quite a bit with, and that you've gotten particularly involved with the after-school programs. So what kinds of work has the city done, and you've done it in cooperation, right?
Yep.
With for your youth and after school, and kind of why you did it? Fill us in a little.
Yeah, a little bit. I think that we've always had a youth crime problem, and so we had a perf study done that kind of came in. It was some really smart police-orientated people came in and did a big study for Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center, and kind of delivered a report and said, keep doing what you're doing, you're going to have the same problem. So we need to do stuff differently. And we really bought into that. And so part of that outcome was Brooklyn Bridge Alliance, which is a partnership between Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, 4 school districts, and Hennepin County. And we partner as all of us together to try to say what our kids doing after school.
Right.
And we try to not say it's the school's job, the city's job, the county's job. We've taken upon all of ourselves, and we've experienced good success. And one of the things that we've found unique about, especially Brooklyn Park, I think, and nationally, is that we measure the results. So we can prove that the stuff pays off. And so, we know that participation, I think it was 2014 was the last measurement point, participation was up 65%. Youth crime went down 41%. And so we know that that investment. Yeah, you can see it
if you track it along.
And so that's gone along with our change in how we do policing, which is more community orientated. And so we know that after school does many things. One of them is cut crime. And we're starting to see the school districts are starting to see better grades, more higher graduation rates. We're not ready to say everything is because of one thing, but we think
it's part of it.
All these little pieces are creating an environment kids to be successful. Because we always say if you give a kid one option, they'll take it. And if it's a bad option,
that's true.
They'll take it. And so but if you give a kid a good option, most of the time they're going to take the good stuff.
Now, most of those activities are at your Zanewood area?
Yes, yep. And so we've had a lot of activities where we kind of bring kids in.
Okay.
We connect with the schools, so we know that if kids aren't getting the schoolwork done, they can't take part in activities. What we're going to start to do is actually start to map out where kids aren't being connected.
Okay.
And try to bring park services to them. So maybe it's an apartment complex.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to do like weekly mobile parks where we're bringing out to the parking lot.
Right.
And then try to bring activities to the kids, because some of these kids aren't able to get the
Oh,
same
right, right. And so in a proactive way.
Yep. So we're trying to kind of do both things. Now we know it works,
Yeah.
right? Now we need to, let's find out where aren't we having an effect, and most of it's transportation related. Kids can't get to what we have, so let's bring it to them. So we're just going to start and play with that.
And you won't know till you try some things what works best.
And we know the programming works. Is will the mobile part work?
Right.
Or is it better to say we should actually offer a bus that brings the kids? We don't know yet. We're going to try probably a combination of both. And the apartment complexes support that because they've got these kids who got nothing better to do.
Right, right.
And nothing better to do usually means trouble.
Right, right. Yeah, it's better to be on top of something ahead of time.
Yep, I know when I was that age, if I had nothing better to do, I'd find something to do, and it wasn't usually a positive experience.
So the collaboration is part of the success.
Yes.
Is because you do have the different cities, you have the different school districts.
Yep.
They're all part of the process.
Yep, and I think what makes us have a national reputation, which is a couple times in the last few months we've spoken nationally on this, is that we can measure the data and collect it. And a lot of cities will invest in kids, but they can't actually prove it. They say, oh, we know it's doing something, but we're actually trying to say we need to understand what. Because if something's not working, we need to stop doing it.
Right.
If something's working, we need to expand on it.
Yeah, so you were invited to be part of, at the University of Southern California, right?
Yes.
There's a Schwarzenegger, I think I could say it.
The governor.
Instituted, right. But it's an institute at the university.
Yep.
And you were invited to a conference there, or?
So on the West Coast, this is probably the big after-school event. We've been invited to the East Coast. We've been in D.C. for the After-School Alliance. And so Governor Schwarzenegger, before he was governor, his passion was always after school. So for long before probably he was even really big movie star, he was very involved with after-school activities. So this is his pet project. And so he raises a lot of money to do this, and he believes in it 100%. And so he hosts an event once a year. We were asked to take part in that, and it was it was a fun experience. Again, meet Arnold, the Terminator, And but just to be part of that process, I think it was the city that was part of it, and people were very excited when we were talking about what we try to deliver.
And there were what, 5, 6 school cities that were all telling about their programs.
Yep, another one similar size, South Salt Lake City, Fort Worth, Santa Ana, and Nashville. So some big cities, but like I said, we measure it, and it's very unique that we can actually tell people what kids are coming in, track them, and actually tell them we can see the changes in their behavior. We're working on something now. We're working with kids at the Osseo Area Learning Center. Some kids who have had some tough times. And this is their kind of what we call second chance. And they're working with our police department and programming people to help try to change the narrative. So it's exciting. We're trying not to just say, well, as we say, there are 10% of the kids that are going to succeed no matter what. And we're trying to capture the kids who sit on that razor's edge between good and bad.
On the other end.
Yes. We're trying to get the more riskier kids.
Oh, right. Now, a whole different area is the Blue Line, or the Bottineau Light Rail Transit. And maybe you give a little brief history about that in the area of Brooklyn Park. What's happened in the past that brings us up to the current?
I think it's about a 10-year process. It was started. And at various stages, it comes to a point where everybody has to come together and say, okay, are we going to do rail, we're going to do bus line, and then they keep it at various points. And so right now, we're at the stage, we picked a route, I think 2012, can't remember the date exactly, but a couple years ago. And now we're in the design process. And so all along the line from Minneapolis up through Robbinsdale, Crystal, Golden Valley, up to Brook and Park. Now we're in the design phase, which is we're trying to figure out how does this line going to get put in. Where is it going to go? So in Brook and Park, it's going to come up 81.
Okay.
We'll cut over about 73rd Avenue,
Okay.
over 81. It'll catch on to West Broadway. From West Broadway, it'll head north all the way to Target, so north of 610. It goes down the middle of West Broadway. And so the original plans last year were a lot of house taking, whole houses.
Right.
And we tabled that because we thought there was a better way and we wanted
Okay.
more discussion. And now we're back to that. The latest plans have no houses being taken. However, pieces will have to be acquired, right away and stuff like that.
Right.
And so now we're hearing people say, "Hey, wait a minute! I want to be taken, or I don't want to be left behind. I don't want to be that close."
Right.
And so we're having those discussions.
Oh, sure.
And so it's a process, and not everybody's at the same page. Some people love it, some people hate it.
A lot of differences of opinion.
Yeah, it's a wide. And you were talking about down West Broadway, but we know based off all those businesses I was talking about,
Right.
the Baxter, Olympus, Target,
Right.
Design Ready Controls have told us that they're here because of light rail and 610.
Right.
The apartment complex that we're going to approve, that luxury one, they're there for light rail and 610.
Right.
And so we know it has an economic impact on the city, and so we're working our way through that process. This year is just design. Next year is municipal consent.
Okay, now how many stations will end up being in Brooklyn Park?
About 5.
Okay.
Or I should say, not about 5. It is 5.
Okay.
So we're looking at about $500 million of infrastructure investment in the city, and we know it's going to have an impact. Some of it's going to be negative. People don't want to have it.
Right.
But
Right.
in the long run, when you look at the transit map, cities wide. When you go to another city and you look at, everybody knows in DC, Silver
Right,
Springs,
right.
because at the end of the line.
Right.
And so everybody knows at the end of the rail lines, the names.
Right.
Brooklyn Park has the opportunity to be the end of that line. Eden
True,
Prairie.
right,
So when you
right.
talk about Bloomington, Eden Prairie, Brooklyn
Yeah.
Park, maybe Woodbury in the future, or maybe Egan, that's the cities are going to be the big cities for the next 100 years because they're going to be at the end of the line, and that's where development occurs.
Right. Right. Now, with these 5 different stations, the design process means what's going to happen at each of these areas, right?
Yeah, it's got, so you got the line being developed,
Right.
and then at each station there's a work group that kind of looks and says, okay, how do we want that to be? How does it? Does it sit in the middle? How does the stop work? And it kind of takes a look at what we're going to do, and that
Right.
leads into the next process, which is transit-oriented design, which is how does the city want to redo zoning
right,
around some of this stuff? Do we want to have an area that right next to college is one stop? There's an opportunity there if people want to invest it, put something special there.
Right.
Shops, condos and things like that. So that typically is what's happened at the other lines. You tend to see house values go up
Right.
because demand is there for development.
And there are lots of public meetings for people to come and find out what they're looking at, put their
Yep.
2 cents worth in, and
And then some, more than just 2 cents,
Right.
I think. Some people, no, and that's part of the process. We've been trying
Right.
to be open as much as we can. And some of the times you don't have the answers because we're midstream. We don't know where we're going to put.
Right.
And so, but we try to be as forthcoming as we can. And Maplebrook has some effects. The townhomes, they're good people with concerns. And so we've been trying to get their input, understand, is there things that can be done? How do they want stops? How do they want things to be?
Right.
Because right now we're talking about design. It's not
Right.
whether you love it or hate it. It's what would it look like.
What's going to happen with
Right.
it? Right.
And then next year we get to the municipal consent.
Right. Yeah, because you can't consent till you know what it is.
Exactly. And so a lot of people are like, I don't like this, or I love this,
Yeah.
and it's like we're just trying to get this part done. And Dan Solers from the Met Council, he's the project lead. He tells people all the time, my job is to design a line. I'm not to determine how it gets funded. I'm not to determine if that's a good
Right,
idea. He goes,
right.
I hand it back to the politicians at that point, but my job is to design a line, taking into account what the city wants it to be and what, all aspects.
Right. Now, people out in Brooklyn Park, if they're concerned about the issue, they can go on your website to find out when the public meetings are,
Yep.
or they can go on the Met Council's website.
Either or both. The best way
Okay,
to do
either
it
one?
is
Okay.
send an email to LRT
Okay.
at brooklynpark.org.
Okay.
And then you'll be on the mailing list.
Okay.
And so anybody on that mailing list will immediately get emails. Anything the Met Council sends out, the Hennepin County or the city, always get sent to from LRT at brookandpark.org.
Yeah, so all the people out there that are concerned about this issue have an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we need their input.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
if, assuming it goes through, Brook and Park at every
Right.
decision point has said
Right.
yes. It gets designed one time.
Right, right. And
And
this
if you
is
don't-
it, right?
Yes, and I tell people all the time, if you don't like it, you still want to be involved in this process because you still want to have some say in what
Oh,
happens.
definitely.
Because
Right.
lots of things happen people don't want to have happen. This is your time to say,
Right.
here's how I want things to work.
And it will have some effect. It might not change it the way you want to, but
You know-
if you don't put the input in,
Absolutely. It already has. I think of the Maplebrook townhomes, they're already talking about how do they want to light where they don't have one now? Do they want to light protecting their in and out?
Oh, right.
Do they want berming? Some of those things that we haven't quite got to. There's some townhomes that people want to be bought out. They're really close. And the Met Council saying, you know what? There's 4 of you that want to be bought. You all have one. It makes sense for us to do it. So there's a lot of give and take.
Ah, that's happening right now.
Yes, and so we've told people all along, love it or hate it, don't want it, do
Right.
want it, you need to be involved.
And the design process goes until when?
It goes up until the end of this month, April.
Okay.
And then we come to not a decision point, just a kind of, it continues onward. I'm on
Okay.
a couple committees, but it's kind of we're starting to get things closer.
Okay.
And so some of the things start to get nailed down, like it's going to be in the middle of the road. That's pretty much,
Right.
we're starting to get we've already shrunken the sides so that we're not having to acquire people's property, except for right away.
Right.
And so before we had 24 homes that would have had to been bought.
Ah, that,
You
yeah.
know, and it forcibly bought in some cases,
Oh,
but now we're
right.
down to 0.
Yeah, that was a big plus for
Right.
people.
Yeah, and so we know that as we talk more, when we understand things, we find out, and the Met Council does too, finds out more information that says, hey, okay, here's an idea, let's do this. And some things you can't change, but there are
Right.
some things you can.
Right. So it's moving along.
Yes. Yep.
And then it'll get into the next year, it'll be where they'll be getting, you have to give your assent to it.
Yep. They
Each
call it
city.
municipal consent.
Yeah.
And so every city, at every kind of, it's like a line dance. Everybody
Yeah.
has to step one, and then you all
Right.
look, make sure everybody else is with you, and you
Yeah.
do another step. And so right now we're in the design phase.
Uh-huh.
Other cities are going through it as well.
So we'll keep touching base to find out what's happening
Yep.
next.
Yes, it's not and we still haven't got to the point where we know it's being funded. We know it's on the plans.
Right.
And so all these pieces.
Kind of got to move forward step by
Yeah,
step.
it takes, at the end of the time, it'll take 2 decades.
Yeah.
But, 610 took 5 decades.
Oh, yeah. So that was going on
Yeah,
forever.
going moves slow, unfortunately.
Right.
So sometimes it's good, though, it moves slow.
Yeah. Yeah, then you take care of things that need to get done because they're getting brought up.
Well, in West Broadway, the redesign isn't just about the rail, it's also the road. Hennepin County is
Oh,
going to
right.
put bike lanes on each side. Things that West Broadway has never had and is needed have been kind of held up by the idea that there may be a rail running down the
Yeah.
middle. And county's like, we're not going to do anything until we know what's
Right.
going on with that.
Yeah, to get all that settled.
Yep.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the programs that Brooklyn Park is working on with youth at risk.
Yep.
That there is, maybe you can tell us a little bit about a presidential initiative,
Yep.
My Brother's Keeper, and then the city was involved, and then the spin-off from that.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 separate programs. One is My Brother's Keeper.
Right.
It's President Obama's initiative.
Okay.
And Cities United is same kind of initiative, but it's initiated by the mayors of New Orleans and Philadelphia.
Okay.
And that one's really National League Cities. And Brook and Park's been involved with both because they're both about changing the future of young men of color.
Okay. So the My Brother's Keepers program, what does it do for people out there?
Yeah.
They don't know
so
what
I'll
happened,
cover
right.
both of them because they kind
Okay.
of the goals are very
Okay.
similar. So basically, it's about saying here's what cities who are going to try to provide
Okay.
opportunities so that young men of color have opportunities. Here's the things that we know we need to tackle, and so it's like a checklist.
Right.
And so this checklist, the White House helped bring the resources so that some stuff we're doing after school.
Right.
We talked about Zanewood. We're check. We're doing that. Okay. Other things like youth development for workforce development, early school learning, those kind of things are resources in the community that we may or may not have.
Oh, sure.
And so we try to work with them to identify gaps.
Right.
But most of it, I think it's important that communities say, this is an issue, and that we need to do more.
Oh, right.
And so it's really about asking the community to step up with us, because the city can't do everything.
Oh, that's true.
But Brook Park has been very active in this, and we've said, you're right, we have holes, we have stuff we're covering. And we were honored to be invited to the White House to kind of talk about it.
And so, when was that?
So that was in mid-January.
Aha.
So it was fun. I mean,
I bet.
Like they say, the hardest house to get into is the White House.
Right.
And but going there, we're in about 24 cities that were part of that process. And so we've been fully engaged with that, the idea that we need to do more and be very specific. So, but it kind of gets back to one of the things that we pride ourselves in Brook Park is the leadership nationally, that we're known nationally for what we do.
Right.
And whether it's after school, whether it's My Brother's Keeper, Cities United. I spoke at a conference in DC on Cities United. I was part of the team of mayors that kind of tried to sell it to other mayors to get involved. And it's because we know this has value to our community.
Right, you've seen it.
Yep.
Now, what's different with Cities United than what you just said?
It's really, My Brother's Keeper is really presidential, so you have the power of the White House.
It comes from there.
And Cities
and
United,
with some funding and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cities United is really originated out of National League of Cities.
Oh, okay.
So it was two things that started, and what happened is I was actually in New Orleans for the first. I was one of 20 mayors who helped start Cities United. We were there in New Orleans. Because of a snowstorm, the My Brother's Keeper initiative announcement got delayed, and so it ended up being the same day that we were meeting.
Oh.
So we had actually a conference call with President Obama on the afternoon.
Right.
While he announced it, and he was talking to us because at the same time we're talking about the same thing.
Right, the same kind of.
And so basically, we've kind of at the city level, we said these are same thing, two different programs, but really the same goal, and so we treat them as the same thing. And recently, we just had our first kind of community first discussion on My Brother's Keeper, and looking at trying to identify areas to look at, because you can't take everything on, like 3 or 4, and so we've been reporting that back to the White House, and that's where they're going to help us with resources. They've already talking about working with the technical college, community colleges, talking about providing scholarships, and so this is where we get some of those access to funding and programs that we wouldn't have if we weren't involved.
So the initiatives, what steps are you taking right now moving forward?
Right now.
There's a whole range of things you could be doing.
So some stuff is already moving, right? After school, there's some stuff. What we try to do, if Mayor Lunde decided what was the 3 most important things, this would be the shortest initiative in the history. What we try to do is say the community needs to be involved with African American leaders, church leaders, school leaders, teachers, and we had that at North Hennepin a couple weeks ago. And from there, we're going to collate data and try to come out. Here's the 3 areas we're going to focus on. And then we go back to that community and say, okay, here's our 3 areas. Let's look at it again and figure out how can we tackle these 3 areas. So the first one is about identifying our focus. Next one will be about how can we work on these focus areas and what resources. And then we'll start to, it's meant to live on. It's, the plight of some of these young males of color. They've been decades in the building. And it's not going to be fixed in a year. It's going to take decades to fix.
Well, and it's going to take a lot of different groups working at it from different angles.
Yep. And one thing about Minnesota, and we like to think we're good at many things, one thing we're not good at is the education gap between whites and non-whites, the employment gap, and there's a lot of gaps. But that basically says we're doing a really good job. We're failing when it comes to some of these areas. And as our schools become more diverse, our problems are going to become more deeper because the kids who are having the tougher times are more likely to be a higher percentage of the new graduates. And so for our economic future as a state,
definitely,
we have to. It's very important.
We have to figure out
something.
What will work.
Right now we're failing. I think we're like 48th in many categories. And that, being next to Mississippi, not the river, but the state, on these ratings is not a place that you want to take pride in. And that's where we are.
So, can you think of some of the specific areas that we can tell people about? Because everything we said is real general.
Absolutely.
Just to give a few specific.
Well, I think one of the things that we just started this summer was a workforce youth development.
Okay.
And so there are kids in our community who aren't even ready for internships. So we're calling them mentorships.
Ah.
And because they have no one in their life, you know,
Right.
I watched my dad go to work.
Oh,
I knew
right,
what going to
right,
work meant.
right.
Some kids don't have that person in their life going to
True.
work, and so they have no idea that 8 o'clock means 8 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
that there's responsibility, and so they're not even ready for the job. They're not even ready for an internship. So we're working with some community partners, companies,
Okay.
have stepped and said, you know, I'll take a kid for 10 hours. That's what we're asking, is a
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
10-hour commitment to say, let's get a kid just to see just to
What
shadow.
goes on, right?
What
yeah.
is 8 means 8.
Yeah,
A tie means a tie.
right.
Well, how do I behave? All those things that I was taught
Right.
watching my dad
Oh,
go to
yeah,
work.
yeah.
These kids have never been done. So this is like the first step before they can get to an internship.
Oh, yeah.
They need to understand what goes into it. And so that's one of the concrete things we're doing now. So we're asking if there are companies,
Uh-huh.
small businesses, large businesses, who want to mentor a kid for 8 to 10 hours. And we'll match them up. We're going to train these kids before they even see
Okay.
an internship. They're going to have to earn their way to it.
Sure.
And we're going to kind of make sure those kids are ready and they're willing. And we're going to help walk that process through and have people, because we want these kids to be successful. We know that.
Oh, right.
And so that's one of the things, and I think one other area we're talking about things the community has done is, the teen homeless shelter.
Oh, right.
And
right.
so that was built rather quickly. It's the first suburban teen homeless shelter. It's the only one right now.
Right.
And so we tend to be a center of topics there, but it's about identifying those areas of pain
Right.
and identifying resources and what can we do. So it's kind of that model is, figure out what we want
Right.
to do, bring the resources to bear, and do that. So.
And the city plays an active role.
Yep,
in
and
the
I think
process.
if people are looking for next steps, getting involved with, once we figure out those focus areas.
Right.
If people say, I want to get involved with this, we'll have lots of news on the next meeting.
Right.
And ask people, just come. And if you're interested on this, come and see. And maybe there's something you're like, hey, wait a minute, I can help with
Right.
this early childhood reading. And
Yeah,
things
and
like
you
that.
need the volunteers from out in your community to make it work.
If this is, like I've said, if it's just a Mayor Lunde thing,
Right.
it will fail.
Right.
If it's a city hall only fail, it will fail. It has to be community driven. It has to be community led, because Mayor Lunde's not going to be around all the time, and the city hall is going to lose focus. But
Right.
people in the community who care.
And so part of the city's process is to pull all these people together.
Yep, we're trying to provide kind of a framework.
Right.
We're not trying to tell people what they should focus on,
Right.
what's important, but we're trying to say this is important. Let us help you. And then behind us, we have the White House. We have National League of
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Cities.
right,
We have these big
right,
players who are
right.
like, who when they hear our results are like, hey, we can help with this part.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, challenges we have is getting African American males and females to become police officers.
Right, right.
It's a lack of trust.
Right.
And it's, and it's a variety of things.
Uh-huh.
And so how can we do that? And so one of the things we've asked for help is just understand best practices. What communities have, we like to copy success.
Right. I want to thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing all these ideas and information about Brooklyn Park with our audience out there. If you've got questions about it, I hope that you took down Mayor Lunde's name and email and could be in contact with him. And if it's an issue in your city, take the time to get more information about it and contact your mayors and city council people. And we're glad that you've been with us tonight, and we hope you'll join us next week. Bye.